Welcome to the Write and Unite podcast, where we explore the power of writing to bring people together. Join hosts Ankit Shukla and Nico Casal as they share insights, stories, and conversations about the art and impact of the written word.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Write and Unite podcast, where we discuss writing, essentially unite the world through writing. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Nico Casal. Nico, how are you doing?
Doing good. Good to see you again, and good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to see you too. And it's been busy. It's been a lot of fun at the same time. Sure, you've been keeping busy.
It's still going pretty well. Yeah, still pretty strong. The writing's going strong too. I think I just hit 120,000 words in the current epic fantasy novel, so I've written too much, but hopefully it'll, a little bit of editing will make that fine.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a thick book, huh?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
One of the series.
Yeah, that's impressive. I think the longest book I ever wrote was at least for myself, 50,000. Maybe with ghostwriting, I've written a little bit longer, but yeah, it's impressive. 120,000. I've definitely never written a book that long.
Well, I've gotten up to 250,000 before, and someone informed me that was about the length of Dune, and then I realized I was writing too much.
Yeah. What writing program do you use? Word, Google Docs?
Usually Microsoft Word. Sometimes Google Docs if I have to share it, but Microsoft Word just has so many capabilities. It's just easier for me to work with.
Yeah, good. Yeah, perfect. Well, today's topic, and this was actually decided on by you, and you actually came up with this idea, so I'll give you that credit, but I'm going to read it directly from the message you sent me, so I don't screw it up. So the potential topic is your fictional world worth fighting for, or a world worth fighting. So essentially what we're asking is, if you've written a fictional book, and that particular world that you're describing, that your characters are living in, is it the type of world that you would enjoy living in, and would you fight to keep it? Or is it the type of world that's full of evil? It's not a place that you would essentially like to live, or a place you'd like to be, and you're essentially fighting against it, fighting to change it. Do I have that right, Nico?
It's a pretty good way of summing it up, yeah. I'd say it goes a little deeper, and I think examples are going to make it a little easier to understand. Some examples of worlds worth fighting for, of course, classic Lord of the Rings. Middle Earth is a world worth fighting for, and we know this because generally the people are good, and the forces of good will usually overcome the forces of darkness, and then we have wonderful places like Hobbiton and Rivendell that were shown that just show that it's a good world. Narnia is another great example of a world that's worth fighting for. It's generally good aligned. It just happens to have these evil outsiders who come in, whether the evil outsiders are the White Queen or the Telmarines and Tash and all that. These are all the Calormans. These are all outsiders who come into the world, and so they have to fight for it. Even Chronicles of Prydain, I would say that's a world worth fighting for. But as far as a world worth fighting, I think the easiest example that comes to mind, and I've mentioned this before, the idea of, Conan the Barbarian. That is a world worth fighting. And Conan is a character who is specifically designed to be able to step forth and fight the brutal, cruel world full of monsters and darkness and all that sort of thing. Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire. That's also a world definitely worth fighting. It is far more evil than it is good. There is some good in it, and we root for the good characters, but even the good characters are pretty tainted by it. But it's a world worth fighting. And the challenge, I suppose the way to sum it up is that, does the challenge come from, I better fight to protect this good world that I'm living in, or struggle to protect this good world? Because that's the thing, it's not always fighting. Sometimes it's just, you got to make speeches or build something. Or is it, this world is going to destroy me if I let it, so I'm going to rise to the challenge to fight against that.
Yeah.
One tends to be more character focused.
Yeah. And, depends on who you ask. Currently we're living in a world worth fighting for or a world worth fighting. So, I'll leave it at that. But
I wonder,
not who you ask.
yeah, when you touch on that idea of are we living in a world that's worth fighting for, or a world worth fighting? I mean, I'm not going to give any kind of definitive answer to that because I don't think that's really my place in a podcast like this. But I do think that views on the answer to that question will affect a writer's writing. I think that George R. R. Martin is probably more cynical than C.S. Lewis was. I think that's pretty apparent. The world that George R. R. Martin has created, he says, is very much based on history, and it's true, but he also condensed roughly 1,000 years of history into a roughly 7-year period, and just the horrible things from that span of history. People say the medieval times were a dark and brutal time. Well, the medieval times were a 1,000-year period. Of course, horrible atrocities happened over the course of a 1,000-year period.
Right.
But Martin, being kind of a cynical person, if we're being honest, he condensed that all into about 7 years. And, it's not to say that his cynicism is necessarily wrong. If we think he's wrong, then it's up to us to be extra kind to try to prove him wrong.
Right. Write our own book.
Yeah.
Claims, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's not necessarily, though, I mean, I suppose I shouldn't say that all writers who write the world worth fighting are cynical by nature. Because honestly, any kind of survival story, like Hatchet, that's the world worth fighting, because that's the man versus nature conflict. I would even argue that Star Wars is takes place in a world that's far more worth fighting than worth fighting for. Luke and Han and Leia, sure, they fight for each other, but they're not fighting for some really beautiful, wonderful planet where everything's good. You could argue Alderaan, but Alderaan gets blown up before we ever see it.
Yeah.
It's more that their world is a terrible one, full of the Empire and the Hutts and all kinds of criminal elements and monsters, and Mos Eisley is a hive of scum and villainy and all this sort of thing, and so they have to rise to the occasion to fight the world that they live in.
Yeah. Like I think of a book like a Gulliver's Travel, where he's essentially multiple worlds, with the planet, but multiple worlds, and he's constantly fighting to either change it or survive it, and it's interesting in that nature. And I think about other things like, for instance, like To Kill a Mockingbird, my personal favorite book. They're kind of in a, the situation with Atticus Scout and his family are relatively good. They obviously suffered from the Depression also, but Atticus is a pretty successful lawyer. He's got 2 good children. They're not suffering like a lot of other people that did during the Depression. And also there's the undertones of racism in that book with I apologize, I completely forgot the character's name off the top of my head, but the black character who was falsely accused.
Yeah, the man with one arm. Yeah,
and essentially, obviously, he was living in a world that he wanted to fight, and he could.
Yeah. That's very much a big theme in that, the idea that the world they live in is one that is worth fighting, because it is full of not just racism, although racism is the big hot button topic, but all kinds of prejudice.
Right.
You have the prejudice against Boo Radley, who saves the kids at the end.
Yeah.
You have the prejudice even that the kids engage in against the sort of mean old woman, who's only really mean because she's suffering from morphine withdrawals.
Right,
she's having a rough time.
Yeah.
People have struggles that we don't see, and so Atticus has seen that prejudice is such a big thing in that world, and he has decided it is worth it for him to fight against prejudice.
Right, exactly.
And that's an example of a story about a world worth fighting that is not cynical, really. I would call that a very hopeful story, even for as bad as it turns out for, Atticus's client.
Yeah. It's essentially he was. I guess he was trying to fight the world because he did try to escape, and unfortunately that ended in his demise. Spoiler alert for those who haven't read the book. I'll throw that in there, but Yeah,
Yeah, spoiling a book that's almost 100 years old.
yeah. You know which character, movie character, Boo Radley always reminded me of, or kind of recently reminds me of Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, because
Yeah,
he just kind of obviously we come to know him, but he's kind of like helping
kind of
Daniel.
seems like an oddball.
Like like for example, he fixes his bike,
Mm,
after it gets wrecked from falling down the hill and all that.
yeah,
Similar to how when the kids are running and they get their clothes caught. Was it Atticus's older brother? I think gets his like pants caught on the fence and they're ripped, but when he goes back to get them, like the next day, they're folded neatly over the fence. So it's kind of like Drew Radley helping them behind the scenes. They don't realize it, and then
yeah,
they realize at the end that Drew Radley was their hero, and then this Daniel realizes Mr. Miyagi's his hero when he fights off his bullies for him when he's getting jumped. So it's just kind of I don't know. I just see a lot of similarities between those two characters. Kind
yeah,
of
yeah. I can see that.
background heroes that you don't realize.
Yeah. Well, and even in Karate Kid, I think that even that's an example of the kid Daniel has moved into a world that is worth fighting
Yeah, yeah,
because it has this bent prejudice against him.
yeah.
Now, the girl is kind to him, and Mr. Miyagi is kind to him, but it's very clear that he has to get tough or die, so to
Right,
speak.
right, yeah. Because
And Mr. Miyagi shows him how to get tough without becoming a monster in the process.
right, right. He and it's funny because like a lot of because he made friends as soon as he got there, but they all turned on him. When he got beaten up on the beach, and they all kind of turned on him, and were fake friends the whole time, and then they eventually become friends with him again when he wins the tournament. So it's just, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting story. Um, but in your particular case, you've written a lot of books, a lot of fiction books. What are some
Yeah.
examples of books you've written, I guess, that are take place in worlds worth fighting for?
Well, my epic fantasy Third Genesis series, this one took me a while to figure out which category it fell into because it is a world that is ruled over by very cruel false gods and that sort of thing. They have these beings called the Archons who are genetically engineered to look angelic. And then these Archons are enforcing their will and such. And there's inquisitions and crusades. Thought, gosh, this world's actually pretty terrible. But then I remembered that I do have a lot of instances of things like just showing that the world is beautiful in certain ways. Bioluminescence abounds in this world. And while certainly there's a lot of cruelty, I have a lot of people who are kind for kindness' sake. And in fact, in one of the books, part of the climax is the community around the main characters rallying around them to help them. So, for as dark as Third Genesis gets, it is a world worth fighting for. In my Mousy Fables series, the fantasy series for children, that is also a world worth fighting for because while there is certainly, it has its fair share of evils and prejudices and things like that going on, generally people are good and generally the world itself is good. It's just that that evil or wrongness, really, which is more how they refer to it in that setting, finds its way in. Now, but then inversely, I also have the Promised Land Posse series, which is a sort of horror western action adventure series, which is very much a world worth fighting to an extreme degree.
Right.
Because it's full of monsters and abominations and horrible weather, and it's quite apocalyptic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely great examples. And in my own case, like I haven't written so much fantasy fiction like you have, but like for instance, I wrote my book Daisy Pilgrimage, which is the story about an Indian family immigrating to America. And even though they face their challenges, some prejudice, especially, following 9/11, things like that, we all know what kind of happened there, what was going on.
Yeah,
It was still a world worth fighting for because overall, their experience was good and were able to build a better life for themselves by coming to a new land, making a lot of sacrifices.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so it's my latest book, Call Me Raven Carter. It just came out, so I won't give away too much of the story. But essentially, it's it follows around Raven Carter, who essentially is like a raven. Ravens are birds who have good memories. They hold grudges. They basically treat you how you treat them, and they remember faces. They can, so if you treated a raven well, they're going to remember, and if you treated them awful, they're going to remember that too. So Raven Carter is kind of that same mindset of a raven, and a lot of times he's fighting the world he's living in, but more so going after people that deserve it, that he feels deserve some type of revenge placed upon them, whether it's they treated him bad or someone else. But then again, he's kind of living in a world that he's fighting for, because he's, he does see a lot of good in the world, but it's kind of a interesting mix there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, that's definitely an interesting concept to think about. Do you think that when an author writes a book and he's fighting for, or he's having the characters fight against the world they're living in, essentially they don't like the world and they want to change it, fight against it. Do you think there needs to be some type of resolution at the end always, or can there be something, I guess, open-ended at the end, like, hey, unfortunately the character does not accomplish his goals, or should there always be some type of resolution?
There'll always be some degree of progress.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the resolution that the main character was looking for. Like, they may have been fighting against the evil empire, and by the end of the story they can't defeat the evil empire, because defeating an evil empire is kind of a big task.
Right.
But still, there should be some degree of progress. And I mean, I'll go back to the Star Wars example. In Empire Strikes Back, ultimately, I would say overall, the bad guys win.
Mm-hmm.
But there is progress made in one particular very important way. And it's that when Luke faced his confrontation with Darth Vader, that even his mentors said that he either wouldn't survive or he would turn to the dark side, one of the two. He chose a third option, which was to run away and call for help from somebody else, which is, first of all, that's growth for Vader, because he realizes that his son is so dedicated to doing what's good that he'll throw even his own safety out the window if he needs to stay on the right side of things. And we even see a very subtle hint of Vader's character development there, that throughout the whole movie he's strangling his officers right and left for the smallest things. It's shocking. But at the end of the movie, after he's had his confrontation with Luke and Luke has gotten away, the Millennium Falcon goes to light speed, and you see the officer who was in charge of the Star Destroyer that Vader's on look terrified, and Vader just walks by him. He doesn't kill him. He's so distracted with what's going on with his son that he forgets to be as evil as he had been before. So there's this hint of progress. And, Luke actually asking for help is breaking down Luke's pride. So there should be progress either in some small way like that, like some previously evil guy is now, being better about things, or there should be progress in the sense of the main character grows.
Right.
And I think that's what we get also in To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Because Atticus loses the case. The poor guy dies trying to escape from prison. But his children grow from the experience. And then once they've seen the true evils of prejudice played out to their extreme degree, that's when they're ready to accept Boo Radley, this man who had been kind of a boogeyman for them for a long time. So yeah, there should always be some kind of progress at the end.
even if, like, let's say the character doesn't win, but maybe he, maybe someone takes over. He inspires someone else to take over it, take the mantle, and continue the work he's been doing for so long.
That's an interesting example. Do you have a specific story in mind where the hero passes on the mantle to somebody else?
Huh. God, nothing that I can. I'm sure. I know there's some out there. I just can't think of any off the top of my head.
I think there's at least one Zorro movie where we have an older Zorro who passes on the mantle of Zorro to somebody else, but I'm not sure if that's at the beginning or at the end because I didn't actually see that one. But yeah, that's certainly an important thing there too. If we,
Yeah.
I think there's a number of westerns that kind of end that way. Certainly, John Wayne's western, The Cowboys, kind of ends with him passing on the torch as he dies to the boys, and they finish the cattle drive without him, and they go and they make the rustlers pay for their crimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, passing of the torch is another important one if the hero fails. The only time that I think it's okay to have a situation where the hero truly loses and there is no progress made is if you're writing something that's really trying to make a very dark point, like say 1984. The end of 1984, our heroes do nothing to bring down the party, which is as oppressive as a government can possibly be, basically. And for that matter, they don't even grow as people. In the end, the party tortures them until they become good, law-abiding citizens again, quote unquote. The party breaks them.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that Orwell wasn't trying to write a triumphant story. He was trying to write a warning of what he saw on the horizon.
Yeah. And I mean, when I think about something like Of Mice and Men, I mean, essentially that has an ending. I mean,
that is a very sad ending.
You kind of, Lenny obviously gets killed, but his best friend, who really is angry at him and don't really understand if he cares for him or not, but at the end, you truly know that he does, because he kills him, but he does it so he does not have to live through however much torture they're about to put him through. So, I mean, even though it's a tragic ending, but there's a little bit of a silver lining in there. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that one's pretty heavy.
Yeah,
and that actually of Mice and Men falls into an interesting genre that I've kind of discovered recently. That, as far as I can tell, there isn't really a name for it yet. But other stories in this genre include Starman, Powder, The Green Mile, Phenomenon, K-Pax, where you essentially have. You start off with a main character who is not exactly quote-unquote normal, and in some cases maybe isn't entirely human, or at least they don't understand human beings the way that most people would. Then this person very early on starts to do extraordinary things, some even potentially miraculous. Over the course of the story, this person encounters the best and worst that humankind has to offer, the best and worst behaviors of mankind. And then, despite experiencing the worst, they do usually come to very much love mankind, and especially love whoever their best friend is in the story. But then at the end, ultimately, they kind of realize they can't stay because there's not a place for them in this world. And so they have to leave in some fashion. And sometimes it's death, like with Lenny. Sometimes it's going back to one's home planet, like in Starman. And sometimes it's a little ambiguous, which is definitely the case with Powder. Although I think he ascended to a higher plane of existence, that sort of thing. But some could interpret that as death.
Yeah, I mean, The Green Mile, obviously. I mean, he does die. I mean, he does die, but obviously, I mean, we can infer that he went to heaven afterwards because he was essentially an angel on Earth. And
Yeah.
it makes a good point. He knows he's not going to survive on Earth, even because Tom Hanks' character. What was Tom Hanks' character's name again?
I can't remember, but go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I can't remember what it was, but go ahead.
Yeah,
with what you were describing.
But his character essentially offers to let Michael Clark Duncan's character loose and say, hey, because he realizes he didn't commit the crime, he wants to let him go. But Michael Clark Duncan's character is like, no, I can't. I'm tired, boss. I'm tired of all the evil in this world. I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. It's a very sad moment. Obviously, he wants to leave this world, and that's what happens to him.
Yeah. For me, the saddest moment in that, the part that broke me was when John Coffey, that's Michael Clark Duncan's character, John Coffey,
Paul,
when he's asked, when he's asked if he wants a blindfold, and he says, "No, I'm afraid of the dark."
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that broke my heart.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and
it's a good story, but some of the best stories turn out sad. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
Well, I mean, outside of all the correctional officers, everyone else in that room, thinks he's an evil man who killed those two little girls, and obviously all the correctional officers are in tears because they know what type of man John Coffey is. It's sad to see, like, oh man, like he left this world and everyone thinks he's an evil man, but he actually essentially isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a great movie. Hard to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's a thing that as writers we need to understand. Is when to embrace what's funny, when to embrace what's sad, when to embrace what's uplifting, and when to embrace what's terrifying. I've been getting a little more interested into the horror genre recently, and I realized that the purpose of horror seems to be to allow us to deal with stress in a controlled environment, in a safe environment, I suppose would be the way to put it. Because the kinds of things that you see in horror movies, of course that would stress you out, but you can tell yourself, but it's not real. Or even if it is one of those rare ones that's based on a true story or something like that, say, well, it's not here. It's not now. And therefore that level of distance allows you to train yourself to be able to handle stress a little better.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, this was definitely a great discussion, and I'm glad we got to talk about some of our favorite fictional books. And yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from you talking about it. So I know, definitely a great topic, and thanks for coming up with it. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to discuss.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to discuss it.
Cool. Well,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll kind of end our evening. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I can't think of anything else, but thank you so much for this podcast.
Absolutely. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for another episode of the Write and Unite podcast, where we essentially unite the world through writing, I should say. I am, again, Ankit Shukla, and as always, I'm joined by Nico Casal, my co-host. And yeah, thanks, Nico, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ankit. See you next time.
All right, audience, and we will see you next time.